Our guest is Carson Lund of Omnes Films and the writer and director of Eephus. This podcast is called All Those Moments. On behalf of my co-host, Luke Baumgarten, I'm Benji Wade. Enjoy the show.
All those moments will be lost in time, like tears in rain.
Carson Lund, welcome to All Those Moments. Thanks for chatting with us. Our podcast started with Eephus. It was also your first feature-length film as a director. Before we even get started, is that a banjo? What's going on over there?
That's a banjo, yeah. It's not a very good banjo, but it is a banjo.
I think I read your Matewan review on Letterboxd this morning.
Oh, yeah?
So I can't help but think of, isn't Bonnie Prince Billy doing some, there's some banjo in Matewan, isn't there?
There is a banjo in Matewan for sure. Yeah.
Yeah.
Also, Bonnie Prince Billy has been in my house.
What?
He didn't.
All right,
he didn't,
go for it. Tell us the story.
He didn't see the banjo. I don't think he came in this room, but he was that we were considering him for a period of time for Topology of Sirens, a film I shot several years ago, and it didn't end up working out. He didn't make it into the cast, but he was here in LA and visited, and my director brought him over and introduced me. So
that's my God, that's awesome. So right off the top of the dome, do you listen to a lot of movie podcasts?
Not really. I'm not a big podcast person, to be honest. I used to be when I had a commute.
Yeah.
When I had a day job, but now that I don't have extended periods of sitting down and listening to something, I don't really listen to podcasts, to be honest.
Yeah. Mostly I'm going to recommend one.
Yeah.
Have you heard of a podcast called To the White Sea?
No, I haven't.
Two filmmakers, Jordan Fish, Ray Tintori. They grabbed the script of the Coen brothers' defunct project called To the White Sea. They read 2 pages at a time, and then they do like intertextual reads of all the Coen brothers movies based on a particular theme that is introduced in the 2 pages that they read. It's incredible. The main character was going to be played by Brad Pitt before the project collapsed. It just showed you like the Coen brothers with all their pull, and even Brad Pitt back in 2001, I think is when the script was doing the rounds. They couldn't get to financing because around page 12 or 13 of the script, there's no more dialogue. And they were like, the financiers were like, we can't do this. This sounds like a movie that Carson Lund would want to make.
All right. I'll have to check that one out for sure. Yeah.
I'll send you a link to it. Okay. Here's my kind of icebreaker for you. Eephus, Carson, top 10 lists from movie critics all over the world. It's number 3 the last time I checked on Rotten Tomatoes for 2025 as far as like the critic score goes. And I know how much all this means to you.
That is purely critic score. It's fairly arbitrary. I mean, it's just about the overall number, and it doesn't matter how many reviews the film has. So I'm not saying it isn't a feat, and I'm not proud of it. It's very nice, but I can't remember what was number 1 on there. It certainly was a film I'd never heard of.
Well, we know that the plural of anecdotes is data. And I have only seen the critics who I pay attention to saying great things about Eephus. So for you, is that like noise, or does it feel affirming in any way that people like who get paid to talk about movies for a living are, saying such glowing things about Eephus?
Oh, it's extremely affirming and validating, and I don't know if that's true of every independent filmmaker, but I'm in a unique position because I was a critic for a very long time. I shouldn't say was. I mean, I still write periodically.
Yeah.
But yeah, I've always paid very close attention to film criticism and film reviews coming out of festivals, and not just writing on new films, writing on old films, repertory films. I pay close attention to that whole beat. So I know a lot of writers personally, and just a lot of writers on Twitter that I've followed for years. So, when I see a certain writer praise Eephus or write a glowing review, or even just write a mixed review that has a lot of insight, I'm very, very pleased that the film's being engaged with on that level.
Dude, that topic of engagement is so like, I was a film critic for about 7 years, in addition to other sorts of art writing. And then I got to this point where it just felt like it was a job. And then I kind of lost my interest in movies for a while, and life moves on and stuff. But part of how I've gotten back into filmmaking, we talked about this in an episode that's going to come out, is a friend of mine just started inviting me to movies and we would talk about it afterwards. And just that, the engagement piece, not just with critics, but just like your fellow moviegoers and having these conversations is one of the things that like we don't have very many universal experiences anymore. It feels really beautiful to me that we can still sometimes do that with movies.
Yeah, no, for sure. I mean, the culture is very atomized. The culture is very alienated, for sure. I'm someone who really cares about having those experiences, and I build my life around it. And I live in Los Angeles, where I have access to those sorts of experiences. So I basically only watch films in the theater. So while I recognize that is what you just described is a problem all around the country, I've sort of insulated myself in such a way where I can live the film going life that I want to live. But yes, I certainly recognize that this is a dwindling. Honestly, it's a privilege that I have and other people have that are able to go to movie theaters regularly. You know,
as you can tell, we're in the bag for Eephus. My gimmick completely fell flat because we had a tech issue, but I
love the shirt. Did you get that from the Music Box store?
I got it from the Music Box store. I will admit to you that it fits exactly okay.
Okay,
Carson, you're going to keep me from drinking beer because if I don't change my habits, I will no longer be able to wear your shirt. It is right on the cusp, my man. I'm between a medium and a large. So
I would say, just go buy another. But unfortunately, we did run out of that full stock on a recent tour.
Yeah, it's the only reason I got the medium because a large wasn't available.
The T-shirts were slow to sell for whatever reason, and Music Box wanted to stop putting them out, I guess, because they felt like they weren't as popular. But sounds like we need to print just one more.
Just one more for your guy.
Yeah.
Luke, do you want to dive in? Do you want to?
Yeah. So, I mean, you already got a chance to chat with Benji, and I was a little jealous about that. And I just wanted to say I'm super excited to meet you, man, not just because of this beautiful film, but and how it helped us launch our podcast and kind of really nail down this idea we had about actually kind of bringing the audience into every episode. Because I heard about this film when you guys when you went on Chapo, and then, not be honest, I kind of forgot about it because I've heard about a lot of media on that podcast. And then in a completely separate part of my life, some baseball dork friends, the people that are, the South Hill Turkeys, 0-17, just one of the most incredible beer league teams of all time, incredibly bad. We're also talking about it, and these are not Chapo listeners. And so they were like, these friends of mine were like, hey, whose house are we going to go to watch this movie? And we had this, and Benji and I were just like, let's just host it at the theater and see what happens. The discussion afterwards was so beautiful, not just as a meditation on baseball, but it also touched on life and death. It just organically touched on civic bonds and a lot of the things that you were clearly thinking about in the movie. People got it so clearly.
Yeah.
Whether or not that was any of your intent as a filmmaker, it brought up stuff for me as a viewer that, I don't know, it really unlocked some stuff for me. So you've been barnstorming this film all over the place. Are all of your audiences getting as much out of it as we did?
Well, first of all, thank you so much. And yes, it was our intention to specifically target you. We had to.
Well, you nailed it. Yeah.
Original mood boards. We had you up there.
Yeah, you got our asses.
Yeah, you nailed it.
No, but seriously, that's really sweet to hear. Of course, yeah. I mean, I wasn't thinking about changing American society with the film, but I was trying to question American society and in the current world that we live in, and dredge up all of these ideas about change and what is America, quote unquote, and where are we now and where were we then? All of that was very much floating around on my mind, but also kind of secondary to just making a really specific and personal and heartfelt baseball movie. That's where everything has to start. You don't get at big ideas by targeting the big ideas. You have to keep them in the background and focus on the people in the film and the world you're depicting. So I am really moved by how well the film has connected. It's really been kind of a shock, to be honest. I felt like I was making something fairly esoteric and very specific that maybe only baseball fans would connect with, but it is connected not only with baseball fans, but with fans of other sports, fans of other hobbyists, speak, and also with an international cinephile audience. Because we've screened the film all around the world, and people who have no idea what baseball even is, they don't even understand, how the game is scored, and they are attracted to the movie, which is very interesting. I think as someone who knows baseball, and you guys clearly do, like you understand the shape of the movie very intuitively,
Yeah.
where it's going and why it's going there, and why the teams are shifting back and forth from field to dugout. These are things that not every viewer intuitively understands, and yet it hasn't read as some sort of like completely esoteric object for those viewers. It feels very human and relatable. So yeah, I mean that's all a surprise to me. But I guess if anything, it just validates the idea that as an artist, you have to just pursue extreme specificity, and not worry about alienating people, not worry about the audience, quote unquote. Just make the truest film you can. And
so you're saying your international tour wasn't just Japan, Korea, and like Taiwan or something, the other 4 countries that play baseball?
We haven't even touched a lot of those places yet. The film opens in a few weeks in Japan, actually. I think October 17th.
Oh, wow.
Wow.
Maybe, yeah. So a month away. But we've, as far as like international theatrical runs, we've only had a very small run in France, which had a lot to do with us, premiering in Cannes and finding supporters there. It's not that France is necessarily much of a baseball hub.
Yeah.
I was surprised nonetheless to find quite a few recreational leagues in France that really rallied around the film.
That's cool.
We have distribution in India and Indonesia, but I don't think it's open there yet. So it's been hard to gauge, but what I'm really talking about is more so like the festival run.
I want to come back to the word esoteric in a moment when we end up talking inevitably about Hollis Frampton. But when it obviously wouldn't scale for you as a filmmaker, or maybe it would, I don't know, to go take your film out to audiences and have all that direct interaction. But the thing about our podcast that I have found super interesting, and when Luke's describing the reception from these adult league baseball players, it included Bill Spaceman Lee's son, Mike, which I think, I don't know if you recall that from the podcast when that was revealed. Yeah. I didn't know it when we were in the audience that was a thing, but Bill's son plays in this league. But just this idea of not only getting people into movie theaters, but also getting them to share conversations and responses to the movies that they're watching. So I'm just kind of curious, like how your movie and its reception with these audience has maybe changed your feelings going forward as a filmmaker.
Nah, I mean, yeah, I guess only in the sense, like I said, that it validated that I should pursue the films I want to make
that you're good at it. Okay.
Yeah. Well, to say, like, I don't need to water things down, I still, when you're pitching a project, you still need to water things down to an extent, or kind of play up certain elements of the project that may be more commercial. But no, I think I just want to pursue exactly what I want to make, and not think about commerciality so much. And I think that, this experience with Eephus just showed me that like a wide viewership can embrace a movie that has qualities that they're not familiar with, pacing that they're not familiar with. And they can embrace it because they relate to something about it, or that it feels true and human and not cynical, And I think a lot of media in the current American culture is very cynical. So
it is.
It hasn't changed my ideas about how I want to make films. It just, I think, just reinforced it.
You mentioned to me Hollis Frampton.
Can we explain who Hollis Frampton is for the viewers who might not know?
Famous experimental structuralist filmmaker, and specifically Zorn's Lemma. Just in terms of, you said that you thought you were going to make, I think, a more structuralist film when you set out to make Eephus. Were you initially going to make and show and depict an entire baseball game in the sort of rigid structuralist approach of like Hollis Frampton's experimental films?
That was the kind of initial idea, or that was the seed of the idea. And it evolved quite a bit from that. But I think the movie is what it is because that idea took root at the very beginning. I think once we started writing the script, we got very interested in the characters and the world, and it became more of a narrative film in a lot of ways. But I think there was always this idea in the back of our head, like let's make this almost punishingly long surveillance of a baseball game, and really sort of a way of like capturing the light passing across a field over the course of a day from a number of sort of rigidly chosen angles, because baseball is such a rigidly geographic game in terms of the diamond and the spacing and the fence relative to the home plate and these sorts of things. So I was like, if I can choose certain critical angles with which to shoot this action, we can kind of create a full itinerary of this location, and we would make sort of something like a landscape film that is composed within 9 innings of baseball and told in real time.
Wow.
And we would have this sort of Zen meditative experience. Maybe it's something more like that makes more sense in a museum installation or something. It might have just been purely conceptual, because I think I am more of I'm drawn to both the conceptual and the narrative, So I found that as we started writing, the movie just kind of became a hybrid of those two impulses, and it is what it is now because of that. But certainly, like watching something like Zorn's Lemma, or there's many other films that I'm very drawn to because of they have a form and a structure that is not germane to narrative. It's the alphabet, like with Zorn's Lemma. It's the alphabet, or it's the roll of film, that runs out in the final scene where it's out of the field, and then the alphabet, it forms the structure of the first half of the film, and what that once you reach the end of the alphabet, that you're going to move on to something new. You don't know what that will be, but it just creates these fun sort of perceptual games that for the viewer, that when you watch it, I think it provides a little more just unexpected kind of titillation, I guess.
Yeah. I mean, I think since we're going there, I guess if I had to give like a coloring book version of Zorn's Lemma, it starts with a presentation of the alphabet, then words as signifiers in like a cultural landscape. And then eventually those words give way to it's like a treatise on semiotics almost, and the relationship between images and how we interpret and take in watching movies. Frankly, I mean, that seems like it has a lot to say about that. I guess does that cover that movie a little bit? It's 2 hours long.
Absolutely, that covers it. Yeah. And then the film reel itself becomes another form of semiotics that is then posed in contrast to the written word, and that language. The film's very much just about the limits of different forms of language, and how cinema is its own language, and it transforms the written word as well by through editing and through the camera. So the film's quite different from Eephus, but films like this and films like James Benning's One Way Boogie Woogie, or there's another film, a Chinese film I really like called Oxide 2 by Liu Jiayin, that also has, I would say, a structuralist form in the sense that it's a movie about the preparation of one meal of dumplings in a family home, and the camera basically moves 360 degrees around the table. It's all static compositions, but that you're going to move kind of clockwise to a new position after a certain length of time, and then when the meal is finished, that's kind of the end of the movie. So yeah, this idea of just like imposing the film form with a different structure than what is provided by most 3-act structure narrative cinema, was really exciting to me. Like what kind of spontaneity and humanity can be contained within one of these structures. And I felt a baseball game is such a, speaking of semiotics, like it's like a foundational semiotic of American culture,
Totally.
Of our language. We have so much shorthand that's derived from baseball, and many people probably wouldn't even know that some of these quotes we have are derived from baseball. It's such an intrinsic part of our culture. So if I can make a movie that just captures that captures the flow of a single baseball game, there'll be, especially for viewers here, there'll be like this kind of intuitive sense of, okay, I know what the shape of this thing is.
You mentioned to me that related to this idea of approaching it like a Hollis Frampton film, that Franny was not initially going to do the quotes and the scorecard conceit between innings.
There's that old Hank Aaron motto, keep swinging, keep swinging.
And that ended up helping you when you were committed to the, maybe we're going to end up doing a 4-hour movie about baseball, but we can't. Do you want to talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's a long answer potentially. Franny, the character Franny is based on a figure from my past, from my hometown that everyone kind of knew. He would show up at all local baseball games. He was just someone who had a sense. He was a very boisterous character, quite different from what Cliff Blake does in the film with him. But he's someone who I never really knew. No one really seems to have known him intimately. He seemed like there was a loneliness there that was hard to penetrate or understand. But he was also, dealing with that by going to all these baseball games. So we wrote this character around him. And actually, my co-writer, Mike Basta, is also from Nashua. So we were both drawing on similar memories of this person. And then I think the character really transformed when Cliff played him the way he did. He brought so much soul to this character, and really, really played up the loneliness. And would, he's a guy who just knows everything about baseball history, and it's all just sort of second nature to him. And this is how he finds meaning and how he spends his time. Cliff took him somewhere entirely new, and he brought things to the character on set that surprised me, and including the quotes. Actually, the quotes were not written into the script. Oh,
wow.
It was actually a day when he just said, hey, we had a little extra time that day. And he said, do you mind if I start reading? I prepared some quotes, actually. Do you mind if I just read them while we roll the camera? And I said, sure. And I think we rolled for 5 minutes, and he just rattled off a bunch of quotes. And I said, all right, we should probably move on now, Cliff. And he said, I got like 5 more pages. Is that okay? Like, oh, maybe just do 2 more pages. And it's all in like, point, like 8-point font,
Did it include the manhole covers thing, or was that a separate thing? Was that written?
That was written, actually. That was a reference to our hometown. But yeah, he just brought so much preparation to this role and all these different ideas. And then when we shot the scene of him, looking out over the field at the end, he pulled the Lou Gehrig quote out of his ass. Like he just did it in the moment, and it felt exactly right. And I said, can we do that again? Like we did that. And then, but basically we went back and we did the edit. And then I realized, like, okay, we should kind of bookend the film with that. So we actually had to go back and shoot him doing the Gehrig quote at the beginning of the film, now with a very different tone, so that the bookends have a different kind of emotional register. But essentially, as I was going through the post-production process, I realized through a local Facebook group that the real Franny had just passed away.
Oh, wow.
He had been in a long battle with COVID complications, basically, like many people in this country. But yeah, so that just hit me like a ton of bricks, despite the fact that I didn't really know this guy very well, but I'd written an entire character around him. And then suddenly in the edit, he was seeming to be the kind of like soul of the film. But at that point, when I discovered that, we didn't even have the chapter structure. We didn't have the quotes, from Franny that kind of segment the film in terms of the times of day. First pitch, the afternoon, I can't remember all of them. The day, afternoon, sunset, and then twilight and night. So that was a way of structuring the film and giving it a sort of propulsive sense of it's moving towards something that wasn't there before. It was sort of this nebulous, long game that felt more like a purgatory. I think the purgatorial tone is still there, but this gave it a sense of going towards something.
Yeah.
And I did test screenings with and without this. And I usually got that sense from people that, like, okay, I feel like I'm more situated within the film by having this. And then I also ended up changing the final shot. So it's Franny walking into the woods. That was not the final shot of the movie. It was somewhere else in the sequence. The original final shot was actually Graham looking out at the fireworks display.
constantly complain every day that none of the girls like
What an interesting difference that would have been as a
Yeah, for
read in the
sure.
end. That would
Yeah.
have been like triumphant, you know, almost.
Yeah, so the movie really became more structured around Franny as kind of the soul of the whole thing, in a way that it almost suggests that like the game is all happening in his mind. Like, who is he? He's like a woodland creature who comes out and imagines a baseball game and then walks back into the woods. You know, so it gave it this, for me, like a kind of fairy tale quality. But like I said, I mean, originally he was just local color in the script.
Yeah.
He wasn't kind of this grounding force.
That's so fascinating. So even starting with the structuralist talk, and like kind of this was my question generally, we've already started getting into in specific, is like, this is a baseball movie, but it doesn't really feel in the final edit like a sports movie, in the sense, and feel free to push back on this, but in the sense that it doesn't adhere to any of the traditional motivations of a sports movie. Like, the outcome doesn't actually matter who wins or loses the game. The field is already kind of condemned. And a lot of the sports action literally happens off camera. So maybe could you talk a little bit and just keep cooking on like how those choices sort of coming from this, like, maybe this will be a 9-inning structuralist thing, to the stuff you just described with Franny, and like these other little elements that make it feel like such a unique baseball movie and kind of an anti-sports movie in some way in terms of the motivations. Like, how did that come together as you were writing the film with Michael Boston and Nate Fisher? And then, maybe just keep cooking on like the things you discovered as you were shooting as a director.
Yeah, I mean, we didn't really set out to make an anti-sports movie. I would say we wanted to make an ultimate baseball movie, in the sense that it actually feels like baseball.
Yeah, totally.
I think a lot of these famous American baseball movies, many of which I like, don't really feel like the game, at least as I've experienced it as a player. Because they often sacrifice the pace of the game and the poetry of it.
Oh, for sure. Yeah.
And I wanted to put all that stuff front and center, and kind of, really spotlight the downtime and the moments of stasis and the socializing. That's all part of the sport,
Totally.
all the anticipation is very much a part of the sport. And I think it's also a game that there's always a sense of frustration and failure and built up expectation that then gets shattered.
Yeah.
You have a rally and you come within one, and then the game's over because someone strikes out. So these are intrinsic emotions of this game that, I mean, in terms of like the kind of setup and then lack of payoff, that was all. That wasn't me, like, trying to get my kicks over like messing with the genre. That was just me trying to really reflect how it feels like to play baseball.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And that was something we definitely talked about quite early on with the writing process. Was, if we're gonna hint at fireworks, we're not going to show them. If we're going to hint at a close game, there's a little bit of a rivalry between these two teams, and one's an underdog and one's more well manned. Like, one of them, it can't end triumphantly. That's just not how it's going to happen. It has to be a walk-off walk. That is like the funniest way for a baseball game to end. And it feels very plausible to me in the context of how we played it out. But yeah, I mean, it's a huge project to tackle, because you're thinking about 20 baseball players, 2 umpires, a handful of spectators. You have to try to find ways to make them all important in some way in the story, because I think this is a film about a community coming to grips with saying goodbye to the field that has given these people meaning.
That's something we talked a lot about, is that your movie gave some purchase to not just all the players, but the people on the periphery, the kids that come to watch, the kids of the Bill Belinda character. Everybody has just a moment to say something and to participate a little bit, and it ends up, it feels like it gives a tiny bit of weight to everybody, and sort of load balances the sort of narrative threads that are being explored.
Yeah. I mean, that was the goal. Wasn't to say like, let's make sure everyone has this amount of minutes on screen or whatever.
Yeah.
but we did want we did target a kind of a feeling of equity between the different characters. And the way we did that was we wrote the film as sort of a box score, in addition to writing it as a script. So we, kind of we figured out what do we want to what do we want to happen in a baseball game? How is this game going to go? When are the runs scored? What are the lineups? What are the rosters looking like? You know, who's playing in the field? Are there any substitutions? This kind of thing. Like, we had to figure all that stuff out, so we knew where anyone was on the field at any given time. That we knew how many outs there were, what the situation was, who was up, who was in the dugout having a conversation. You know, and it allowed us to sort of see the film as like a bunch of units of time. You know, a baseball game, 9 innings, 27 outs, 54 outs. And each of those outs and innings provides sort of a question of like, well, where's our camera? What is worth seeing in this moment? And sometimes that's the baseball game. And sometimes that's what's on the edge of the baseball game. Sometimes that's the dugout. Sometimes that's just the trees, you know? And it was sort of an intuitive process in finding out how we toggled between those different threads, but we knew we had certain benchmarks we wanted to hit, certain narrative guidelines. We wanted some tension to arise thirds through the way through the movie. So it's even when you try to escape 3 acts, you still land with the 3 acts in a way.
Yeah.
Like there's a sense of tension and release that's provided by that structure. But so we are figuring out where does it make sense for these beats to happen, and then where does it make sense to kind of let some air out and just hang out with some people on the bench, you know, and then go back to the game. So it was really a challenge, but a very fun one. And then the edit, I feel like we had to make quite a few changes. I mean, like I said, we wrote this as a much longer game. Like it was a 10 inning game. Actually, originally it was an extra innings game, and actually a lot of articles still describe it as an extra innings game.
It kind of feels that way when it gets dark. Yeah. Yep.
But if you actually go down and map this game out on your own score sheet, you'll find that there's all these sort of inconsistencies that resulted from the editing process. Just
interesting.
By nature of me trying to condense, shorten, and find different flows of energy that weren't just stasis or purgatory.
Yeah.
So yeah, but I also felt it was justified because as the game gets dark and as the umpires leave, they are sort of forming their own makeshift democracy, and
absolutely, man,
they're kind of losing a sense of what inning it is anyway, you know, or who's in.
You mentioned anticipation. I was thinking about distraction, you know, especially in the shots or the moments where characters are talking and then like somebody hits the ball and you don't even see it because it's off screen. And I was mostly thinking about that as a spectator of the sport. But when I played a lot as a younger kid, and I probably wouldn't have played as much if a coach hadn't taken me from like left field where I started to catcher. Because I had ADHD, I didn't get diagnosed with until my 30s. And so my experience of playing the outfield is nothing but distraction of being like, I really want to be the hero. I'm the left fielder, whatever. And also I can't, it's the, you know, aspects of this game. I'll just like notice a butterfly and stare off into space. And then I'll hear the crack of a bat. And it's like, oh yeah, I'm playing a game. Like that part was really great to me. And how that never ends. Like it's both what you love. The pace is intrinsic to baseball. It's what creates so much of the drama, but it's a really interesting kind of slow paced kind of drama.
Well, baseball also has, I think, the closest relationship to cinema of any sport. And I don't think it's close. If you think of all the punctuation, all the pauses, well, that's what being on set is. You're constantly stopping, moving, resetting. I think of also the process of filmmaking. You never know when you're on set, when you're going to be needed. You have to keep your head on a swivel because the gaffer might call for a light or anything, you know, at any given point. And I think even the way that you approached this distribution of weight across the different participants in the movie, I would imagine that was happening on set as well. We started this podcast before we even recorded, I think, talking about John Sayles and Matewan. And I remember his book about Matewan, him saying he wanted everybody on set to kind of know at any given point what's happening, what's the motivation behind using a dolly in this particular shot, so that the grip feels invested and can feel like a participant. Do you think there's a through line there, or am I talking shit here?
No, you're not grasping at straws. I mean, yeah, our set felt very. I mean, I was the director, obviously, but there was a democratic sense of creative input, I think, and it was a fairly small crew. We got really close. We lived in the same house. Like the crew lived in one house, the cast lived mostly in another place. There was this familial feeling to it, and yeah, I mean, people did need to know what the game situation was within the movie
Yeah.
at any given time. I mean, certainly my AD and my script supervisor, but then the actors knew too. Sometimes they would correct me and say, "Oh, I'm actually supposed to be on second right now, so you can't put me in the scene in the background in the dugout."
That's awesome.
So it's like we all were contributing equally, I'd say, to making this thing happen. I feel very, very close with my crew because we've worked together many times, and these were a lot of my closest friends. So there was a teamwork aspect, much like, when you join a team and the roster has this chemistry, we built that ourselves. As for the baseball cinema analogy, you're talking about it from the perspective of, being on a team and then being on a crew. I think also being a spectator of both, there's a similarity there too. I mean, obviously there's massive pastimes in the 20th century. They remain very popular, but not what they once were. Watching movies and watching baseball, or at least watching the kind of movies I like to watch, requires a sense of patience and being present and immersing yourself and being open to watching people stand around for hours on end without a lot of, catharsis sometimes.
Yeah, that analogy of the participants then going to the dugout to watch, between innings, their teammates do things. And then it's like, oh, it's my turn. It's very much like being on set. It almost goes without saying that that's what it is. Luke and I joked when we did the podcast. I would like to think that I've watched so many movies and I had, a background in going to film school and being on set and doing all these things enough to just kind of sense that the vibe must have been really strong on Eephus of not just the people in front of the camera, but all the folks behind it. We also joked about the fact that your brother, and Michael Basta and others have like 5 roles a piece on the project. So these guys were doing so many different things. And
we actually have more roles than that. But at some point you're like,
yeah, it looks ridiculous.
This looks ridiculous. Yeah.
It's like the film school thing of editor, sound department, dolly grip. Yeah. It's like, okay, I'm not going to give myself all the credits that I had in it. But if you go by the evidence, Carson, of how the people that were in your movie feel about it, I can't tell you how many people have reached out to us about the podcast to just talk about how they not just appreciated the podcast, but how much it meant to them to be part of your movie. I don't know if I haven't shared that with you in our previous conversations, but it's anybody from the people that were, of course, the actors, so many people reached out, people that were just involved peripherally with the production that are DMing saying, we loved being on this movie so much. Thank you for doing a podcast about it.
Wow. I am curious who has reached out to you. That's always great to hear. I mean, yeah, this casting crew continues to be just very close friends, and they come to so many of the Eephus events. I mean, I can always count on many people to be there. Sometimes too many people show up at a screening. I'm like, well, we can't all fit on stage, so what are we supposed to do? Yeah, but it's really great. I mean, this is when I first got into filmmaking, and I watched behind the scenes on Dazed and Confused. I was like, man, I want to make a film where it feels like that. Everyone has a great time. And it feels like a summer camp. And that's what this did. I mean, we're on a baseball field for a whole month. And it's that's one of my favorite places to be. I'm playing catch in between shots, or doing batting practice when we have free time. It was, it's extremely fun. This is a very banal thing to say, I guess, but I think it hopefully you feel that coming off the screen, Yeah,
but the thing is, and I don't think that many people who haven't participated in the process of being on set during the production of a film, it can suck so much.
Yeah.
It's kind of hell. I loved pre-production and post-production. I never wanted anything to do with physical production because it's so freaking stressful, and the worst side of people can come out. The best side can come out, but often the worst side of people comes out.
Yeah, I went to film school and at Emerson College, and there were so many of my peers were on set like every weekend working on their peers' films, and I would often turn down these opportunities because I just didn't enjoy being on set in the same way they did. And I've been on a number of sets in my life where there's no air conditioning. It's hot. Everyone's sweating. There's not enough food, not enough water. You're cramped in a small space, maybe right next to a Fresnel light that's making you sweat even more. So like I've been in a lot of very uncomfortable filming situations, and at some point I said, I don't want to do this. Why not? If I'm going to direct a film, I want to make it really fun, really pleasant, and just to have a good time. Everyone's going to do better work in that situation. So in a very a very primitive way, like I made Eephus because I wanted to be in New England autumn, for on a baseball field for a whole month, to be in great weather with beautiful scenery and a bunch of my friends. Like,
Yeah.
so
It obviously made a huge difference to how it came out in the film. I mean, I have to ask one dorky question because I can't help myself. I thought for sure Luke asked me about this during all the different transitions in the lighting and just like the continuity nightmare that must have you guys endured. And I was like, oh, well, they must have shot a few nights at Magic Hour or whatever. But then I heard you in an interview say that you guys shot some stuff day for night and you had some particular technique. Do you mind sharing just a little bit of inside baseball about that?
A lot of the pre-production involved very long conversations between me, Greg Tango, the cinematographer, and Mike Basta, who was my co-writer, but also the AD. And just going through scheduling the film and figuring out where the camera should be any day and where and how many cast members we should have for that day. These sorts of things. Really, really intricate scheduling to try to save money, essentially. But we basically realized early on that like there's no way we're going to shoot these dusk and twilight scenes at actual dusk and twilight because that's such a short span of a day. We started putting our heads together about how to do that, and Greg Tango brought up an effect that they actually used in I think it was Mad Max, the original Mad Max.
Okay,
they were shooting on overcast days during the day. And there's a certain camera process, a certain LUT that you use, you apply to the image and you overexpose by 2 stops, and then you apply the LUT, and it brings the image down, and it's very dim, but you're retaining all of the information in the shadows that you'd otherwise lose if you were exposing to true dusk or true twilight.
Yep.
So, we shot all those scenes during gray days when we couldn't shoot the other parts of the game. And then we ended up having too many gray days, and we had already shot that entire passage of the film, and we're like, now what do we do at this time? We had to start lighting the dugout and make on a gray day to make it seem like it was a sunny day and that sort of thing. But yeah, it was it allowed us to shoot more freely and not worry about rushing to beat the clock. So yeah, it was Tango's idea, and I think it really paid off. And actually, in the coloring process, that was fun because we were at Company 3 with our colorist Miles Kula was with us, and he was pushing for us to brighten up those scenes just a little bit, to bring them back from the murky unintelligibility. And Tango and I were really pushing for you to not be able to see very much.
Throw. Thanks for the help. Strike? Strike. Absolute fucking garbage.
Oh, I'm so glad you did it the way you did. Because first of all, I'm going to give myself the excuse of modern cameras and high dynamic range of them that I didn't detect that it wasn't actually Magic Hour. Because when Luke asked me about it, I was like, I was even referencing Terrence Malick. I was like, well, see, in this movie, Days of Heaven, they just shot in Magic Hour every day. And I think credit to these boys, they did the same thing. Like, you're like, no, we did it differently than that.
Well, no, there are scenes. So Magic Hour, I consider at the time when the golden light is still out.
Yeah.
And we did shoot a lot of the sunset scenes at true sunset or true sunrise, to get the low light. So we did shoot a lot of that way. And actually a couple of the scenes at what we call dusk, before it's like the blue twilight, we did shoot those practically as well. So there is some real, beautiful dusk and sunset imagery in the film, but that twilight section, that happens in the blink of an eye, in reality.
Totally.
I was like listening to a random podcast about like the crisis that of boys, that people are facing, kids are, boys are behind, blah, blah. And it was this.
The boy crisis. Is that what they're calling it now?
Yep, they're calling it boy crisis. And this guy was talking about, people say you need to spend quality time with your kids. He's like, I actually think you need to spend garbage time with your kids. It's like the moments when you're driving them to soccer practice that really matter. And we're not having like a big family moment. It strikes me when you mentioned like what you were doing on set to kind of create a fun atmosphere. It's like, I think we think so much about, and whether it's like politics or political organizing or making art, you think about the work without thinking about the garbage time around it. And it just strikes me that that's a really beautiful baseball itself. As we've talked about at length already, is sort of a game with a lot of garbage time built in. And not just at the end of games. Like, I'm a big basketball fan. It's like, okay, we're in garbage time now. So who's going to like pad their stats? It's like a whole game filled with garbage time. And it strikes me that that's where community and culture is built. It's not necessarily like yelling at your city council members during the city council meeting. That process starts maybe at a bar, or it starts in an organizing space. And what you're definitely meditating on in this film, what I think we're really trying to meditate on in this podcast, is like, there's the thing you go to a place for, and then there's all the community that happens around it while you're there. And it doesn't have to be baseball. It can be a knitting circle or something. And there's just something, it feels like we've lost, and I don't know where we lost this exactly. Maybe it's the hyper efficiency that we're all striving for in our lives, or that, has become kind of a cultural like god that we all worship, or the loss of these third spaces for digital spaces. But that's the real shit, man. It's what it feels like to me. And I feel like we've talked about that on so many different levels already today.
Yeah. I wanted to treat the baseball game as a ritual that they can go to once a week as a respite from whatever chaos is going on in their lives, and it's a place they can just go and not worry about other responsibilities and truly just experience what you're calling garbage time. I like that. It's the basketball fan in you. This is people are very afraid now of boredom, and that right. At any time there's not a sense of productivity or you're not accomplishing something, or you're not looking at your phone or something, that is, you wasted time or something. And it's this hyper productivity mindset, the grind set, as they say,
the grind set
of contemporary culture that has made us very fearful of boredom and dead time. And I think these are really important for just for the brain to sort of reset. And I go camping a lot, and I spend days out in nature. And obviously we don't have any service, and it's just me and a group of friends, and we're cooking and we're looking at the sunset and just hanging out. So I think that's really crucial. And I think in the socio-cultural context that we depicted in Eephus, that is their form of camping, going to a baseball field for an allotted 3-4 hour span once a week. That's the only way that they've carved out this little escape, and I think that's really crucial to just like for our health.
When my wife and I talk about this, we describe it in terms of like, we have cultivated a pathological intolerance for discomfort, whether that discomfort is boredom, anxiety, whatever it is. It's just, I can just, it's always there. Just give me some give me some dopamine. And we have no ability, as my wife would describe it, to be. We don't know how to be. We always have to be going somewhere. It's like what I'm transitioning toward, an outcome, an objective. There's something that I'm supposed to be doing. I have to be doing. I can't just be.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I feel that completely. I'm guilty of it as well. Like, I look at my phone quite a bit. I'm now a filmmaker who needs to try to make ends meet by making the projects I want to make, and I have to always be on call in a way. But this movie is my way of sort of reckoning with that and trying to make sure that I'm, I have a North Star,
It's partly my fault, Carson. I think before we recorded our Eephus podcast, I was DMing you. I'm really sorry, man. I was excited. I was exuberant about your movie. I wanted to say a couple things about like marrying the kind of high and low reading of your movie, and not go like post-structuralist dissertation on people here, but like we heard a lot of people say it's Sandlot for adults, which I think is super accurate.
Yeah.
But I think that underestimates all the deeper readings that people are making of the movie actively, whether they realize it or not. I mean, we did have responses from people that were so stoked on the one-liners because Luke and I mentioned that we had some regret that we didn't describe enough with how funny Eephus is.
Such a funny movie.
Yeah.
And there's so many reasons for that we don't need to go into. Just watch the movie. It's extremely funny.
Thank you.
There's so much poignance and profundity, like from ideas of death and decay, all the things that are on the Omnes website that describe how you are all approaching movies. I just want to ask you, like, have you experienced this with audiences to where, and you mentioned that you also found yourself creating more of a narrative structure that might make it more of a pleasant experience and a kind of a pop culture experience, the movie, but it's still packed with all these deeper readings that are very, very readily available to people if they want to put in the work.
Yeah. Yeah.
Whether it's Frederick Wiseman or, you and I did talk a little bit about that. I went a little ham on that topic because I was like, I can't believe this dude put Frederick Wiseman in his movie about a baseball field that's being plowed by the guy who made High School. Like, it's what? We have to talk about this. You put it in there. It's your fault.
Yeah, I know. Well, I'm glad you brought up the comedy because it's something I just hope it connects with people when they watch it, but it's not something I usually talk about because they just had the experience of watching the movie. I don't need to reiterate that it's a funny movie. But typically I'll dwell on the death and decay and all that stuff. And then in a Q&A where it's me and Nate will be the court jester and he'll remind everyone that this is actually a very funny movie. Nate is a comedian and he has a great podcast called
his podcast was awesome.
Yeah. It was very important to him that this movie be a joke per minute, like a lot of jokes. But and then it was equally important for me to offset a lot of those jokes, to make them ambient, to sort of put them in the background. And we agreed that was an interesting strategy. It sort of results in that what I've called like ambient comedy. It's like you might laugh at it, you might not even hear it. So maybe a certain part of the theater will hear it, and then another part won't hear that joke. So I like that there can be a variability in audiences' responses. That was my way of sort of like not making it just a joke machine or a gag machine. I didn't want that, but I'm very proud of the comedy that we did arrive on. It feels more textured and lived in.
It also felt really true to like the experience of like hanging out, spectating at a baseball game with a bunch of friends. You're like, you don't catch every joke that everybody says. There is a lot of that. You call it ambient comedy. That kind of feels like my experience of going and seeing sports games with my buddies. I'm curious, when we were talking about the cultural ease, or, just like the community that was built on set, how much of that was a lot of that on the page, or was there some improvisation happening too in the jokes and stuff?
Well, yeah. So it was almost all of it was on the page because we didn't want to just have a framework and then let everyone improvise it. We felt like it would just be a sloppy film. I mean, I maybe would have had to do that if we didn't raise much money and then we just had to go out and shoot something.
Right.
But we had time to write and really, really work on everything. And Nate was very careful to make sure that scenes had sort of like a punchline structure, not all the time, but that there would be threads that would come back around and we'd land the little rim shots here and there. But a lot of the background chatter, sometimes that was material that was cut from the film. Like you'll hear a line that used to be a scene and now it's just in the background.
Interesting. Yeah.
And other times it's just banter that I encouraged to happen in the background, that sort of like plays behind the scripted lines. So if I had written the script out with all of the background chatter included, it would have been a 400-page script,
Yeah, right.
Constantly talking on a baseball field. So a lot of this stuff I had to just let the actors go. So I would say that the dialogue that is foregrounded is scripted, and then a lot of the background stuff is just them playing around. And there were a lot of great lines that we landed on because they were just playing around and because they had built the actors, I should say, they built their own chemistry offset and then brought some of that into the set.
I was going to say just briefly, it's a real testament to that chemistry that I couldn't like. There were foregrounded lines that felt improv to me in the really amazing way of like two actors who feel super comfortable together riffing. And then, so it's like, I couldn't tell. And that's a real testament to the community that was built on set.
I agree, Luke. It's a great observation. And another plaudit to throw at Eephus is that it's indistinguishable. And I can't help but ask, because we brought it up on the podcast, because I found this moment so incredible. Like when Connor Marks is waving the branch around at the tree. Was that something on the page, or was he just dorking around?
Yeah, that's dorking around. I mean, Connor actually is one of the greatest improvisers I've ever worked with.
Intergalactic dude. Yeah.
And if you buy the Blu-ray, you can see a number of his improvisations that didn't make the cut. And he has a great scene with Chris Goodwin, the catcher on the River Dogs, where they're behind a shed. I don't want to give it away, but that scene was entirely improvised because we had a little extra time in the day. It didn't really fit in the movie, but I'm really glad about it on the Blu-ray.
When we watched the movie, I didn't know Nate was Nate, and so his description of the Eephus when talking to Connor, we actually made jokes about that scene because we're just kind of like the way that Nate performed that moment was kind of like, yeah, dude, it's obvious that I'm describing the Eephus pitch as a metaphor for baseball. Go ahead and say the quiet part out loud, dude. I know we're going to end up talking more about Eephus, but I have to ask you a little bit about your role as a film critic and your history with film criticism. If is that of interest to you to talk about a little bit?
Sure.
Let me tee it up this way. You've written some reviews and some criticism for Harvard Film Archive and Slant Magazine. And I actually just want to read something you wrote on Letterboxd in 2014.
Oh,
Carson.
Let's see. That's 11 years ago.
This is unbelievable. Until now, I've been hopelessly ignorant. Foxcatcher reveals a deep, dark secret about America, and the secret is this. This country's legacy is founded upon an unhealthy mix of greed, wealth, and megalomania. It's truly upsetting to hear now, as a citizen of this country for over 2 decades, that there may be something evil brewing beneath the sterilized narratives of American excellence and glory portrayed in mass media. How could I have been in the dark for so long about this sad truth? All right, 2-part question, maybe not even a question. As someone who made self-serious films as an undergrad in film school and really likes Bennett Miller movies, I felt very attacked by you. And I want you to account for this scathing review, because if anybody can't tell, it's
my whole personality.
Deeply satirical. Yes, I feel like I've just had my entire approach as a student filmmaker attacked.
Is there a star rating on that review?
1.5 stars.
Okay, so that's how you know it's satirical. Yeah, I don't usually do those sort of Letterboxd takes anymore. But for whatever reason, I was animated by that film, and I haven't seen it since, so I can't speak very profoundly about it. But I just felt everything that I wrote in there. I just felt like this movie really thought it was passing off what it was doing as complete wisdom and
as poignant. Yes, it did not need to be made. It's a movie that, as a project, really doesn't have anything to add to, like. It's like such a platitude that's also quite banal. Yeah,
exactly. I just felt like it was such a chore to get through, because everything was passed off as this like novel chestnut of wisdom.
You'll never believe what a disgusting megalomaniac did. Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah, it's tough to find the time, and it's really, I never made money on film criticism, so it's not about that, but I had free time, and I was making income with another job. So I would just do it kind of for fun, and just to sort of like work through my thoughts on films and try to form my taste and broaden my horizons and figure out why films were working for me or why they weren't working for me. And eventually I kind of stopped writing the more negative takes because it didn't feel necessary to contribute to the culture. If you're not a working critic, I mean, I'm certainly into critical takes on films that lead you somewhere, productive. But I think a lot of negative writing is just there because the critic is being paid to do it, and he just shits all over a project. I think there's plenty of room for that, and there's a need for that with certain films. But I just started writing more like film criticism that was about my enthusiasm for films, to try to figure out how to, just understand them better and form my own taste as a director and as a viewer, really. So,
I actually super appreciate that, because I used to be the person that it still happens where somebody will get in touch with me when they don't like a movie and they'll go, "Can you please tell me why this movie sucks?" Because they know I'm going to be the person who will say the dozen reasons why this movie was terrible, because I'm the super opinionated take artist,
Yeah.
And I don't like it. I would much rather watch movies. We're getting ready to release a podcast. I mentioned this to you on our phone call about Highest to Lowest, a movie we didn't enjoy, but I'm really hoping that we are effective at just describing and having an informed perspective about why we didn't like it instead of just shitting on it.
Of course. And you have to acknowledge that Spike is, he's a major American artist, and
Absolutely.
there's so many different factors with how his films get made now that take it very far from something like Do the Right Thing. That's a work that's made with pure passion. And now he's in a different register.
Product placement comes to mind.
Yeah.
Let me move this in a different topic that Luke and I both have some things to say about, if that's okay.
Yeah.
I'd like to talk about the Omnes mission statement and nostalgia. And I'll start that with this quote from Adam Naiman, the Ringer critic.
Mm-hmm.
Adam does a bunch of things, but I know that he's a critic for the Ringer these days.
Yes.
And when he was talking about the movie Eddington and Ari Aster specifically, and as we talked about on both podcasts about Eephus and about Eddington, there's this relationship to the loss of unifying civic activities. I'll just paraphrase it that way.
Mm-hmm.
And he's talking about, Adam, in this quote, about the role that nostalgia and specifically like phones, the use and the representation of phones. And so here's what he had to say. He said, "There's a lot of discourse prompted by Paul Schrader a few years ago where he's like, I don't like phones in movies, and young filmmakers don't want to make movies about the present, which isn't wrong. Sometimes the best, brightest, and most lavishly subsidized American filmmakers have a thing for period pieces. But Ari Aster is dealing with the present tense, and he's finding a visually novel way to use social media and texting and personal technology in a way that serves rather than stymies the narrative." So Luke and I talked a lot on our podcast about Eddington about how much cell phones suck in movies when you see someone on a cell phone in a movie, and also just the way that they can completely unravel plot construction, because you get into a story and somebody goes, "This would never happen," because somebody has a fucking phone to solve the problem.
Yeah, just kind of like how the suckiness of that was deliberate and really effective, in my opinion, in Eddington. Do you worry as a filmmaker, or did you worry making this film, that people would sort of come for the nostalgia of this simpler time and miss the sort of maybe what you were trying to say about the present?
Well, I guess if you miss it, that's on you. Not my problem. But no, I mean, everything you just described about the dominance of period pieces, the preference for period pieces among major filmmakers and even certain audiences, this longing to live in the past, or this idea that the past was better or something, or simpler. Obviously these are all fallacies, but obviously they hold a very large sway on the culture. So it feels equally evasive to not make films about people for whom that sway is held, and I don't think that's always true of the lavishly subsidized filmmakers who are making very expensive period pieces. I think sometimes they are indulging in nostalgia. But for this project, like, I wanted to make it about characters who were stuck in the past, who are trying to hold on to some ideal that is real, in their lives. It is a place of comfort. And they may have these cars from the 60s and 70s because they're holding on to material objects that remind them of the past. So, I do. And I also, we just set the movie in the 90s so that they wouldn't have the phones and they wouldn't have the distraction. And I wanted to, I am very much, I'm not someone who wants to completely avoid phones forever. I think for a period of time after they became so prominent, I think there was maybe some merit to resisting this monolithic corporation trying to completely run our lives. And it's like, I don't want to shoot this thing because it's an advertisement, But I think at this point it has become we've become so inundated by it. It has changed the way we think and changed the way we behave that it feels very evasive to just avoid it forever. I think also like Cronenberg with The Shrouds, I think does really interesting things with the modern age. And there's a script I'm writing right now that is not a period piece. It's set in the contemporary times and people use phones. And this is just something we have to deal with. I do think they're very ugly, but I think ugliness is not always something to be avoided in art.
It's a challenge. I mean, and sometimes creatives and filmmakers in particular love to know some boundaries or rules or like something as challenging as to use your expression, it's a great one, the ugliness of phones, but to evade it is so inauthentic to just like invite kind of incredulity. I can't watch a movie where there's just no presence of a cell phone if it's set in modern time. It's just like impossible to believe. Like, as I mentioned on our Eddington podcast, somebody can be in the middle of a conversation and they're going to go, hang on, let me see where this text is from. I mean, if you don't show that, you're not showing how people actually behave with one another in 2025.
Of course. Yeah, it only dawned on me quite recently, actually, when I was writing this project, and my co-writer said to me, there's something very primitive about Apple, the company. I'd never really thought of it this way because I think it's so it's so subtle, the branding, that it is like an Adam and Eve idea. It's like an origin myth. It's like we are now changing society. We are changing the way you think, and now this thing has become infiltrated in our lives, and so it is the new normal. So it feels evasive to not deal with that. But in this film, I really wanted to talk about an earlier era and to question that earlier era, not to show it as something better, but also sometimes there are things about it that are better. And
I respect you saying that if you didn't see the deeper meaning in your movie, that it's on you, audience. I think shout out, Roland Barthes would have been proud of you for saying that, Carson Lund.
Thank you. But I think, you can't leave that movie feeling like this is a triumphant Make America Great Again kind of pageant.
No, not at all. Yeah.
You just don't. You leave with a pit in your stomach. But you're also seduced by those pleasures, like, baseball on a fall day in America. How that's so American, I'm seduced by that as well. So it's like, I want to show that, to build up that illusion and then puncture it. And in the wake of all that to, leave you feeling uneasy.
Can I do one more question about nostalgia, just real quick? And I don't want to make this about Foxcatcher, but it's like, those are both movies, because when Benji brought it up, I was quickly reflecting, both these films are kind of set around the same time. That one was relentlessly bleak, and it was obviously meant to be bleak. So it's telling a horrible story, but there was no hope in it. You somehow managed, and maybe, hopefully this isn't retreading what we've already talked about, but I was just really, really taken by how, yeah, you're right. This is not a triumphant story by any means. It's a sad story. It's a tragedy about the loss of this baseball field. But also there was there was some hope there too. And I don't actually even know if I can pinpoint where the hope was. I just felt it. And so maybe, I don't know if I'm totally off base here, but how did you, if that was something you were trying to also convey, like, how did you achieve that?
At the core of it, it's a story about a bunch of losers, and they're just a bunch of guys playing baseball. This is a minor tragedy, if that. And yet, if you take it as one example among many in a larger story of American history in the last 30, 40 years, you see the bigger tragedy,
Mm-hmm.
You feel for these characters for sure. I mean, I want you to. I want them to be very warm. I don't want to make fun of them. I know I just did make fun of them, but
right.
In the film, we're taking pleasure in poking fun at them and also representing them as real people with real desires and fears and comforts. I think that's where the warmth comes across. These feel like real people that you've met and maybe played baseball with, but the despair comes in all of the subtext that is off screen. The idea of what comes after 1994 in this baseball game.
Right.
Yes, maybe a school comes after, and that's a good thing. We're always facing change. This is more of an existential question than a movie about gentrification, which is very real as well. But we're always facing change, and I want the audience to reflect on the changes that have occurred, and whether those are productive changes, beneficial changes, spiritually enriching changes, or something more bleak. And I fall on the bleaker side, frankly.
Yeah.
That the loss of civic institutions and community building, and more so just presentness, being immersed in the present and not feeling encumbered by one's phone and one's need to be productive and make money and just live a life in America in 2025. I think that is all very bleak. And I think that weighs over the movie. But if you have a heart for the characters and you feel what they're going through, I think you see that, that they're about to enter something even worse than a field being lost,
Yeah. Yep.
And that's what's going to lead us to, the massive division that we have in this country, and the fear of the other, and the kind of, projecting ideas of who other people are in this country.
The warmth and the uplift for me is the relationship your movie has with the audiences. If you're fortunate, like we were, to go watch it with a bunch of adult baseball players that are similar to the players in Eephus, that's awesome. But even if you didn't do that, you can watch the movie and recognize it's like presenting to you on a platter. Frankly, there's an opportunity every day. Put your phone down, go chat with your neighbor. Don't have a conversation with your neighbor on Facebook.
Yeah.
Go walk into their backyard and grab a beer and go break bread. Like, don't, that's, so to me, that's where the warmth and the uplift comes from.
Yeah. It's sort of an agitprop film. It's like telling it's all subtext. Go hang out with your friends, go spend time. That's what I want to say with the film.
I want to ask you, because you brought this up when we chatted previously, and just take this any direction.
Yeah.
The money, the challenge, how fucking hard is it to make a movie like Eephus? How did you get the money to begin with? Can you tell us your budget? How did you pull this off?
Yeah, I mean, I think I've read a lot of pieces that sort of assume that the film was, like any other independent film, it's made with a studio or a production company, and it's sort of greenlit in a more traditional fashion. And I think this assumption comes from the fact that, the film played in theaters, and it was actually at some AMCs, and they must be making money on this because it's a movie that's playing around the country and is written about in The Ringer, and there's a mention of it on Barstool. So yeah, these are real filmmakers. And frankly, I've been privy to that myth my whole life as well. Thinking if a film makes it to my awareness, if it reaches my awareness, then it must be that these people are established filmmakers and that they're all making a living. That's certainly not the case anymore in the current system. And this film was made entirely outside the system, very, very much an independent project. I had to beg, borrow, and steal and pitch many dozens of finance bros who ask me what's the ROI. I didn't know it would get as far as it did, but even though it did get there to Cannes and to many other festivals after that, and then with theatrical release, we're still like so far from even recouping our budget.
Wow.
Just to be totally transparent, that's just how this all works. It's there's so many different hands in the pie trying to get a piece of it, and that's just inevitable. You have to give away things. You have to make compromises as you make a project, especially a first project. I hope I set myself up a little better in the future, but just being completely candid, I haven't made a single dollar on this film. In fact, I've lost a lot of money. And so have the other people who are really crucial to its genesis and production. That's just the way it is. But it was a passion project. We had to do it. We felt it deep in our souls we had to make this project, and that's been true of every film we've made with Omnes has been made outside the system with whatever money we can scrounge up. Eephus and Christmas Eve and Miller's Point were sort of a step up in terms of ambition and scale. We did raise a bit more money, but still we're talking micro budgets for what is typically considered a low budget film, or what is even what is even considered for something like Independent Spirit Awards. These are low budget films that actually cost millions of dollars. And it's very hard to find millions of dollars right now, especially right now. I'm hoping this all turns around and we're just going through a wave like Quentin Tarantino suggested, that, film will be back as the popular art form and there'll be money flowing into projects. I don't know if I share his optimism, but it's a very difficult time right now. And we scrapped this project together, at some level, you have to just be extremely transparent with your collaborators about like, hey, I'm going to make your ends meet for the month, but I can't pay you an adequate rate, frankly. And if that's a deal breaker for you, then, unfortunately we can't work on the project together.
Well, Carson, knowing that your answer to the question from a finance bro of what's the ROI on this project wasn't, hey, have you seen Hollis Frampton's Zorn's Lemma? Like how did you answer those questions to where you ended up that you and your collaborators had the ability to make the film you wanted, but still got just enough money to make it?
I'd say the narrative really evolves over the course of the pitching process. You learn from each blow that you take, and someone leaves the room and is like, absolutely not. You figure out, okay, that didn't quite work. How do we tailor this? I've really changed my mind about this over the years, but basically where we landed on, for Eephus was, let's start just not so much like arguing that this will make money back, but let's just educate the investor on what the landscape is. What are the ways in which a film can make money if it makes money? And then describe how we are positioned to hopefully capitalize on those avenues, but it's at some level, you're also describing the film as something that you're playing up an aspect of the film that is part of it, but not entirely true, like the Sandlot for Adults angle. That certainly was appealing to people, but yeah, you can't go out there and say that this will definitely be a hit. You just don't know, especially without the industrial support on the front end. You have to. It's a guess. And eventually, I found people who were really just excited about the material, excited about the project, and wanted to be in on something cool and wanted to support us. And that's what we found. So now I've sort of changed my tune with certain projects. I just have to talk about them. And I think like Paul Schrader has also described this. Like when you're investing in an independent film nowadays, you are buying into the continuation of culture, like
an art form. Yeah.
In an art form in a time when all of this stuff is really looking fairly bleak. You are part of a resistance against the AI and the big corporate power over media, the corporate control over media. This is a way to push back against that, and you may end up going to a pretty cool party in Cannes, where you'll be able to wear a really nice suit on the red carpet.
Hey, shout out Fortnight! Come on,
like you didn't have that opportunity before I came to you and I proposed a film. So I think Paul Schrader was very blunt about that. He's like, I'm offering people a chance to get on the red carpet. And that's something
that's actually actually great. Actually kind of fascinating and pretty smart.
If you invest in this movie, Zorn's Lemma meets Sandlot, you are participating in an act of defiance. Come on. And we might get to go to Cannes.
You might make your money back, but you also might just lose it, and that's okay. You're paying for something that is valuable in your life. You can now talk about this at dinner parties, and you couldn't talk about it before. So,
and like you're going to have plenty of opportunities for your ROI to be, I'm going to make my money back. How many opportunities are you going to have for the ROI to be like, I got to hang out at Cannes and I was, rubbing elbows with Emma Stone
and Carson Lund
Okay. These ambassadors of art, these patrons. And I think they do exist. They really do.
They do. We're going to talk about them right now. Okay. We're going to talk about our friends at Chapo Trap House. Okay. So Luke introduces this movie at the Magic Lantern in Spokane, Washington, and says, oh, and by the way, I heard about this movie from a podcast. Some dudes from a podcast helped make it. I did not know what he was talking about at the time. He later tells me that it was Chapo Trap House people, Will Menaker, Amber Frost, and I was like, and Chris Wade, and I was like, wait a minute, what? So I'm not going to say that I'm friends with those guys, but I've exchanged many DMs with them over the years. I befriended Chris Wade recently. Shout out, Chris. Congrats on having a kid. So Will, Chris, Amber, Matt, I think mentioned he was going to try to do a voiceover role, but he had a scheduling conflict or something. But my perception that I wanted to just get your take on was, oh, this project was funded by the Chapo Trap House dudes. And I was like, that's cool. That's awesome. Good for them. You told me that's not exactly how it went. So I'm just kind of curious, like from your perspective, like what was the involvement from Will, Amber, Chris, and others?
I wish they could have been involved at an earlier stage. Yeah, we're good friends with them. Full transparency. Amber is dating Nate, and that happened, I think, after we shot the production.
Oh wow.
But we had found different financiers for the production itself, and later on, after post, we needed not after post, during post, we needed additional funding, and then even more when we got into Cannes. There's so many different stages of producing a film that it goes well beyond just the production of it, and every stage is crucial, and you need different partners for those stages, especially on an independent film where you don't have the massive budget up front. You need to kind of chip away at it. So Chapo came in, or I should say Cold Feet came in later in the process and really helped us make things happen for Cannes and put together the funds we needed for that. If we'd met them sooner, I would have loved to incorporate them into the original production plan, and maybe even have one or two of them in the film. That would have been cool. But there is sort of a narrative that this is the Chapo film, and it's a narrative that we've embraced in a sense because they have such a great audience, and we're fans of them and their show, and it's only helped the film gain its current stature, and we're really thankful for that. But it's also a slightly misleading narrative, just because there were many others who made this film happen before they came in. So it's just a complicated thing,
Yeah, and shout out to them. They were also supportive of our podcast when we released the Eephus episode of All Those Moments, which was episode number 2 of the podcast. They were very cool and said kind words and shared it on social media and so forth. And it's actually unsurprising that people like the Chapo folks would participate in funding and helping to fund any aspect of this. It's also what you described is really common for people who don't kind of realize how this goes. We just interviewed Amy Berg, a very renowned Academy Award nominated documentary filmmaker. And for her project about Janis Joplin, she got stuck in the edit. And Alex Gibney came along and helped support financially to get that project over the finish line. But because it was stuck in mud, she couldn't get it out of post-production and didn't have the financing to do it. So I think it happens a lot more than people realize, like how credits are given for whether it's executive producer is like where it typically happens. Shout out to the Chapo Trap House people.
And I should also note that just there was a time when I did listen to more podcasts, and Chapo was the primary one. And I listened to that show pretty religiously through the Bernie campaign, and it was extremely invigorating to listen to. And I would say that show really helped form my perspective on the world and the current American hellscape that we're in,
Yeah.
I'd say that obviously helped inform then the film that we wrote. So all these ideas were percolating. So in a way, it is the Chapo film, for me, moving to LA and sort of starting to listen to them at a formative time, I think, in me thinking about politics and trying to be more involved in that.
I've already taken up so much of your time, so thank you so much. It's been an amazing conversation. I'm not trying to wind it down prematurely. I'm just trying to express some gratitude here. We've mentioned the word patron a couple times. When you were talking about the ROI guys, I was thinking about the Medici family, like where the Medicis thinking about, the ROI on, the Sistine Chapel or whatever, or the Pietà. It also strikes me that there's the funding aspect of patronage, which is obvious, and that's what we need money to make films. It also strikes me that part of patronage back then and through to this day, and another podcast I listen to a lot is Know Your Enemy, and they talk a lot about how the right wing has this whole basically development pipeline and sort of a patronage and promotion pipeline. It definitely includes a lot of money, but it also includes just being like Bill Buckley being like, hey, you're the guy. Like, I want to take you and promote your ideas, your filmmaking ideas. So it's not that you don't wish that you had like all the budget you need. But it also feels kind of fascinating that in addition to helping with just the enough budget to get you through that post-production phase, the Chapo people were also there to serve that other role of patron of just like letting the people that paid attention to them know about this film. And that's got to be, whether or not it recoups, I hope to God this recoups your costs because I want you to keep making movies, but that also has to feel like a pretty, it's such a mixed bag, this world we're living in and the funding mechanism and stuff, but the ability to connect with people and have them support your cause has to feel pretty empowering.
Yeah. And yet I'm also thinking as you talk about, how all large sums of money are tainted,
Right. Totally.
There's no ethical way to make a film, frankly. If you have a lot of money that you're willing to give away, there's chances are you earned it through some way that some organization that was not above board,
ill-gotten means for sure. Yeah.
As I said that, I was like, well, I don't want I was like choosing my words very carefully because my own investors and also future investors, this is just the case. It's not a knock on anyone in particular, but there's no ethical consumption under capitalism, of course.
Right.
In a way, like I feel very, very honored and privileged to have taken some financing help from Chapo, who I think they've earned their money in a very noble way, So, and I recently signed a petition against Mubi for taking a large investment from Sequoia Capital,
right?
Which is complicit in the siege on Gaza, the genocide. So it's very hard to escape this if you're trying to find large sums of money in the current system, and it's something I'm having to actively think about. You can't really escape it, but you can maybe find ways to mitigate it or push against it. The only ethical way to be in the film industry is to leave it. That's
100%. Yeah. But that's basically any industry.
Yeah.
True.
Good news is Chris has mentioned whatever happened with Eephus and their participation in that didn't put them off their appetite for helping to make movies. He and Amber and Will are still involved in some way. And I want to use that as an opportunity to talk about your upcoming projects, right? So you are the cinematographer on Mike Basta's upcoming movie called Raccoon.
Yes,
which just says it's about a salesman. We're not going to get into Raccoon here today. That's not what we're going to do, because we're going to have you back on the podcast probably with Mike Basta, because that'd be fun as hell to talk to the both of you. But you were also, and we can't talk about the Easter egg in one of these many Omnes movies that I picked up on that led to me figuring out what you're working on next. I'm sworn to secrecy. I'm not spilling anything here on this podcast, but you are working on another feature right now. Is that right?
Yeah. I got two projects in the works. One is closer to being shot than the other one, but hopefully it seems closer and yet vanishingly far away at the same time, because we're making a film that's very location dependent, much like Eephus, but this is a type of location that is rapidly disintegrating from the earth.
I feel like we could drop just enough clues that maybe somebody else out there, a sleuth, an Eephus deep dive sleuth like me, could figure out. But yeah, there's a time sensitivity because the themes of cultural decay are still in every Omnes project, right? Is that kind of what's going on?
Yeah, very much so. I mean, it's all rooted in this. I think moving away. I think I grew up in New England and I moved away, and I now live in a very different environment here in California. Yeah. And then so it became very clear to me going back. Anytime I go back home, I see things changing, and places I grew up going to are gone or redeveloped into something else. So I've become very acutely aware of the passage of time, specifically by going back home. And then here in LA, it's a place that's just constantly transforming. So it's sort of like made me question: is there any permanence in the world? And of course the answer is no. Everything's always in flux. But it's I think the move was really instrumental in shaping these ideas that I'm exploring. But to get to the Easter egg you're talking about, I'm not afraid to say this much. The next film I'm doing is about candlepin bowling, which is a regional form of bowling in New England, only in New England, and also parts of Nova Scotia. And there's a reference in the film to Leda Lanes.
I live near Leda Lanes.
Yeah, you can always go bowling.
Yeah. That's something.
Always.
Franny brings up Leda Lanes, which at the time, it wasn't like I was planning to do this film at that time, but but this has been a very important location for me in my life. And, every time going home, I would go back there, and it had sort of been preserved in amber, from well before I was born, actually. There's still rug walls in this space, but now it is as of about a month or two ago, it is gone. And we were dealing with a months long battle with the landlord of the property, and negotiating with him and the owner of the property to shoot in this location. And ultimately, it was more important to develop this property that has so much historic significance in the town of Nashua, New Hampshire, and also just so much current significance for living people who go there or who went there. And it was more important for the landlord to redevelop it and make it into a chain restaurant that we really, really need on that street, on a street of other chain restaurants. So this is the real.
I don't even want to know what restaurant it is.
I don't even know. It's a Mexican restaurant, but it's
all right.
A part of a larger chain, maybe regional chain. I'm not sure. It doesn't matter. But I am feeling quite struck down by these nefarious figures who are ruining local culture, ruining places of recreation for people that where the profit is obviously it was a business made for profit, but just because
the money stays in the community.
Yeah, just because they're in debt, they have to suffer this horrible fate. There's no Medici for Lita Lanes.
No.
People have really praised Eephus for making it into a school instead of a apartment complex or a mall or something, a mall
or a chain restaurant. Yeah,
which I was doing not to skirt away from the idea that does happen, but just to displace the blame, and make it more of an existential film, not such a directly political film. But
it'd be very distracting to the narrative if you had done that.
Yeah. But now in the interim, since making the film, I've just witnessed so many of these things where there are predatory moneyed interests who are coming in and just trampling over local culture, and it's really horrible to witness. And so I really wanted to shoot the film there. That won't happen. We're now currently dealing with a very similar situation at another location. So I've had my fair share of difficult negotiations with soulless people recently, and it's not fun. But
I will cut this out of the podcast if it's not something you answer. But are you saying that the Lita Lanes thing is not going to happen?
Not there. I'm still going to make this film, but the number of candlepin locations in New England are really dwindling.
Okay.
And so it feels like it's a race against time to make a movie that preserves this legacy, this heritage.
Dude, my favorite thing about this is obviously all of my pestering you guys and tagging you in our Instagram reels from the podcast. I don't think you must have seen it. The one where I created some content out of that moment where Franny says, I could go to Lita Lanes, and somebody says, yeah, you can always, I think it's Connor says, you can always go bowling.
Yeah.
And
now has an irony to it that wasn't intended.
Such an irony. And I ended the Instagram reel, because I love editing. It's one bit of joy I get out of managing social media stuff is that I get to edit. But I put in a screenshot of the announcement that Lita Lanes was closing. And I was just like, this must be a real gut punch to these guys. Knowing that at that point, I knew that you and Mike had grown up there.
Yeah. No, it's funny. A lot of people have reached out to me about the closure.
Yeah.
It's like, you don't even know. We've been going through it. We were intimately involved with that whole thing. We know all about it, the whole backstory. It's none of it's uplifting.
We could do a 4-hour deep dive podcast about that unabridged and for the real Eephus heads out there.
Real quickly, just to play on that, like you mentioned the carpeted walls. My mind did not go to a candlestick bowling facility. It went to Pattison's roller rink, which I went and skated at, which I think with our family lore, my mother might have been conceived at. And now they live literally like less than a half mile on the road. And now it's, as Spokane becomes a more diverse place, it's become like this really weirdly thriving part of Black culture in our city, because like roller rinks are still really popular in Black culture. And I don't know. It's like, I'm thinking about, there's like 3 generations just in my family that were impacted by that place. My aunt used to speed skate there, whatever. And that's the other thing we lose when we lose these spaces. Not that you can't make memories in an Applebee's. You
Yeah.
can. I don't know if I would remember the memories that I have as being like intrinsically from Patterson's or intrinsically from Lita Lane's if they had happened at an Applebee's, right? Like there's something about,
God,
and
yeah.
this is not to talk shit about chains necessarily, but like there's a specificity to the places we grow up that are meaningful for us, like the community identity of places, I guess. And when that's, obvious, but I just wanted to underscore it.
Yeah, I actually think like the kind of the specific nuance that you're describing is sort of the whole focus of Tyler Taormina's films, which I've shot. I think the idea that there's a sort of like corporate takeover of spaces that had more of a local flavor when he was young. He grew up in Long Island, and that's a place that I think has it's developed in probably ways that are even faster than my hometown. But for him, like an important part of his youth was like hanging out in parking lots with people. That was the space
For sure, man.
to hang out. And these are, you're under halogen lighting. There's a bunch of chain restaurants around you, or like a cell phone store, and it's like you have to kind of create a place of community in this sort of sterile corporate environment. Even like malls, that's the best example of it. Like when you're at a loss for good baseball fields or good bowling alleys to go to, you actually just end up playing around at the Nokia store or
Totally.
But isn't it crazy to think that we're now starting to mourn the loss of fucking malls?
Yeah,
You
yeah.
know?
No, I'm aware of this too. And
As gross as malls are, I had that reflection the other day. And by the way, last night, Luke, Ray and I were walking, my wife and I were walking and talking about Patterson's and how like, may it continue. So it's an incredible place. Like, should you ever find yourself in Spokane, which we'd love to get you out here, it would be a great place to make a movie about this theme that you're talking about.
That sounds awesome. Yeah, it's, I mean, really now we're getting to a point where we're just mourning the loss of physical space to share.
Exactly.
Absolutely.
Whether it's a shopping mall or not, it's like nothing physical at all. It's all digital. Yeah.
I know.
Ham on Rye, by the way, I just want to say, Tyler, shout out his film. It's on my short list of things to watch.
Yeah. I mean, it's very much about this. I would say like he and I are so close as friends and also collaborators that, Eephus wouldn't be the way it is without his filmography.
Can we talk about something fun to end the podcast?
Certainly.
Boston Red Sox baseball.
Yeah, man.
Just baseball, period. I mentioned to you that there was a section of our Eephus podcast that I took out because I was like, I'm just getting way too dorky here. But I couldn't help but think about, you've got Bill Spaceman Lee and this crazy ass pitch that the Eephus that he ended up having his own variation of it called the Leafus. Okay. He used it all the time in his career. It was actually a very successful pitch for him. But once upon a time, 1975 World Series game, I think it was game 6 or game 7. Mm-hmm. He hung one against the Cincinnati Reds to Tony Perez, who knocked it out of Fenway for a 2-run homer, and they ended up losing that game. They were winning the game when he left the game. I just want Bill to know that I did pay attention to the fact that he left both the games that he started in that series with the lead. But
always quick to remind you that. So
yeah, exactly. I'm sure he is. And then I made this weird cosmic connection to like the 2003 Red Sox that ended up ending the curse, and they had a knuckleballer, Tim Wakefield, rest in peace, on their team. And I was like, were you aware of these things when you were like having this cameo from Bill Lee in your movie?
Yeah. I mean, if not consciously, then certainly subconsciously. I mean, I grew up a huge Red Sox fan. This is a team that is sort of known as lovable losers, especially, after they won the World Series and continued to win a few more. They became known as like a bunch of bearded freaks. And then just like these teams that are kind of hodgepodge together. Mm-hmm. They would often be guys like Wakefield or Manny Ramirez who were just characters, when I grew up watching them. But obviously that there's a longer tradition to that. I think it's just baked into the kind of identity of the team and the way that the Craig Breslows of the world are. What is that role again?
Which
the
role?
head of baseball operations. I forget what they used to call it, but the people in those roles for the Red Sox have often shaped the team around these sorts of hometown favorite kind of oddball misfit type players, and Bill was certainly one of those. So, I mean, I think it's also just very New England to feel like you have to be fighting against some perceived enemy. You have to be well, in this case it's the New York Yankees, but this just informed my whole attitude towards baseball. It was often played by weirdos. So
wasn't is yeah totally.
Yeah.
it is yeah I just know so many strange people that over the years, just real characters that I've played with, and I wanted to capture that and put those people in a film. And so Bill is just like the ultimate example of that. And he was obviously one of the only people who historically through the Eephus that we could actually feel like we could get in touch with and bring into the project. And we had other ideas that didn't come to fruition. So unfortunately Bill did. And he was really into the project from the get-go. So yeah, I mean, it to me, it ties it into this also helped us find financing, to be honest. Like, baseball fans in New England love Bill Lee. Right. You say that he's going to be in the film, and it adds this extra level of value that maybe isn't going to guarantee some box office success, but is at least going to guarantee that it has some serious life in New England.
Well, when I was younger, I didn't throw that hard. Now I'm older, I don't throw much harder. But I got good shit. I'll get you 3 outs.
So yeah, it tied the film into its region, its sports fandom, and also just into baseball history. It was very important that I found someone who had actually played the game and had this sort of mythic aura to them. And also someone who was kind of an outsider and a renegade in the sport, and opposed management and fought for players' rights. And
it seems to me, despite the varying levels of, we'll just call it athleticism and baseball playing prowess of your cast, that you have a very high approval rating among the kind of baseball purist dorks. Do you think that's true?
Yeah. Surprisingly, actually, I was very worried about that, because there have been a few reviews or maybe even just like letterbox paragraphs that are very stinging, because I know they're right. They're like, well, that doesn't look quite real. I mean, come on, this wouldn't have happened. That lead, he's not taking enough of a lead or whatever, right? Like that.
Yeah,
it's true. And because I had to bring these guys back up to speed after having not played for decades. Some of them had played more recently, but I was being a coach throughout this process, and I had to just embrace that. This is a movie about a bunch of guys who are there because they love spending time together on a field, and they love baseball, but they're not great players. They can be sloppy players, and that's going to add to the life and the humanity and the comedy of it all. So I think what does come through is the idea that although these guys aren't great players, they understand the game. They understand where they need to be in any given moment, and they understand the flow of it. They don't look lost in terms of the mental part of the game. So that I think is why it's been able to work for kind of the more proficient players among the audience.
I have to get this in real quick. Jeff, how do you pronounce Jeff's last name?
St. Deek.
Jeff St. Deek. I even DM'd him about this. I was like, there's one dude who definitely sticks out as a guy who can just rip as a baseball player. Did you talk to me about we'll use the word motivation. We'll go film school on this. How did you motivate in your mind the slow motion home run? Because I'm here for it. It was incredible. But I was also like, was this Carson just going, hey, there is one dude in this movie that is an absolute specimen, and we're gonna let him just take the biggest Manny Ramirez swing at a ball and watch that thing fly over the outfield wall. Talk about Jeff St. Deek and his home run in this movie.
Hey, Gary, how you doing?
Pretty good. Back in college.
Nice. Tell your brother I said hi.
Yeah, well, so it's funny because actually one of those letterbox paragraph reviews that I just described did point out that swing is not believable because there's no lower body action. It's all upper body, all upper body, which Jeff will just tell you that's how I swing. I got big muscles. I'm gonna push that ball out of the park. It doesn't matter. But the review is something like, there's no way that ball traveled 350 or whatever.
Because he didn't use his hips and whatever. Yeah.
That is a huge part of hitting, and it's true.
Absolutely.
That ball didn't go that far. But it's what we could get. And thank you, Jeff, for like, I threw him a ton of pitches in the cage just to get it ready and just to try to get that launch angle right.
Yeah.
And I think when we finally went out there and started shooting it, he got that trajectory on like, the fifth pitch or something. So we didn't take too long shooting it, but much respect to Jeff. I certainly don't mean to criticize your lower body, but you are a specimen. That's true. But yeah, no, I mean, for all the kind of baseball movie conventions that we did try to subvert or just leave out, I felt like we needed to show a home run. There's something very holy and spiritual about a home run. It's just something awe-inspiring, right?
Yeah.
It stops a game and everyone's blown away by it. It was important for me to show that both teams were sort of admiring this home run. It wasn't just, the River Dogs are upset because they just gave up a run. It wasn't about, it was like, this is a moment that really feels like or there's almost this illusion, a temporary illusion of, we're stopping time. Like, because something so amazing just happened in a baseball game. I think you feel that when you're playing it too. So again, this all just goes back to like my own perception of playing a baseball game and the way that time passes. When something really amazing happens in the game, it does feel like time slows down for a minute.
Yeah, absolutely.
And then you get back to the long stretches of nothing. But it was important to include that one trope, I think, and to give it a sense of triumph, but also a sense of sort of a fleeting disappointment as well. I think that's what we did with the music there. There's a sense of sadness because this is the last time that a home run will be hit here.
Yeah. There's the beautiful sort of like, I think what we've been mostly talking about here is like the universal aspects of baseball. And I think when I saw that home run to me was like all of those dudes appreciating a thing maybe some of them used to be able to do, probably can't do anymore, and being able to see it like in real life and not just like watching it on TV. There's that moment of reverence that you're talking about when like somebody just really does something incredible, whether it's on a pickup basketball court or in a sanctioned game or something. Mm-hmm. And when you were mentioning like Bill Spaceman Lee and like maybe that doesn't get that's not it's your Brad Pitt of a sort, but what it gets you is this authenticity in New England. I had never really, and maybe you could unpack this a little bit, but I'd been thinking so much about what this movie got right in terms of in the universal aspect of baseball and how we all had so many, moments where it's like, yeah, that's what I remember. Also balancing that with this specificity of like getting what it's like to watch baseball in New England, right, can be just as important for a group of fans like that. Like if we were going to do the Patterson's roller rink movie, I would want to make sure that this played in North Spokane as well as it played in Atlanta or something. And maybe there's a tension there, maybe there's not, but like, were you thinking about that?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think so much of the great American independent cinema of the past is hyper regional, mm-hmm. that they're films that you really feel the sense of place and how the people are a product of that place and the time, the era that you're in, you really feel that very vividly. I'm thinking about all kinds of films, but even early Linklater films by Eagle Pennell, the films he made in Texas, like Last Night at the Alamo, that beautiful movie. Many Cassavetes films, Wanda, the film Wanda by Barbara Loden. You really feel this sense of time and place, and I think we've really lost that from American movies. I think just because so many films are shot in tax havens and made made to stand for somewhere else. Like a lot of people are now shot in Georgia or Louisiana. I thought it was so funny. Speaking of Linklater, when he made Hitman, and it was like a film based on a story in Texas, and he shot in Louisiana, but he sort of like tried to hide where it was shot. It's just like, just embrace it, man. Come on.
Yeah.
So I that sort of like sterility and vagueness is very common now, I think, in bigger budget movies. And I feel like I really miss seeing films where people feel like they're from a very specific region, and you get a sense of the locations that only exist there. And obviously, this is a moot point as everything gets more homogenized, and basically everything we just talked about in this whole discussion, we are losing that specificity just from the physical world itself.
Right.
And that's tough. But I think for me, it's very important to try to preserve those little bits of specificity and local culture that do still exist. So yeah, it was, figuring out where this was shot was really key. But the funny thing is we did shoot it in Massachusetts because it's a tax haven.
Right.
It didn't end up working out for us because we spent so little money on certain things like payroll that allow you to get that refund, or rebate. But I wanted it to be shot in New Hampshire because I grew up there. But essentially New Hampshire and Massachusetts look pretty similar. So
yeah, I want to just say thanks to all of your cast and crew who reached out to our podcast to say something to us or to share a comment on the YouTube video, including, we mentioned Jeff, Stephen Radokia, David Pridemore, David Torres Jr., Chris Goodwin, Russ Gannon. They've all been, John Smith Jr. All these people were so cool about just reaching out and saying something. And it obviously is a testament to how much they enjoyed being part of this film. Mm-hmm. Carson Lund, we can't thank you enough. You've given us over 2 hours of your time.
Yeah, man. That's so
massively, massively appreciated. Thank you so much for coming on the podcast. We did chat in our first conversation about, and I want to make it official, so I'm going to put you on the spot. Do you want to come back, be our third chair, and talk about a movie? And it could be a movie of your choosing. You want to do Michael Snow? Let's do it. I'm down for whatever, dude.
Yeah, I'm happy to. It might have to wait a little while I try to get these films off the ground, but I'm happy to come back whenever it makes sense. This has been
and of course, we'd love to have you come back to talk about whatever you do next. Of course, we'll do something about Raccoon. That almost goes without saying. Again, thank you so much for coming on all those moments. We super appreciate you, Carson.
Thank you, guys. It's been awesome.